No one will care how much you know until they know how much you care.
We're back with another episode of the peopleHum interview series. I'm your host Sumita Mariam, and let's begin with a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year, and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Earl is an accomplished corporate executive, entrepreneur, and author. He's currently the founder and managing partner of Richer Life LLC. He's also one of the 2 citizen members of the City of Phoenix Business Investment Board. Earl forged a successful and rewarding 34-year corporate career as a systems engineer, project manager, and corporate and technology executive. He has held senior technical and leadership positions within Fortune 100, mid-market, and venture companies, including Honeywell Inc., Motorola Inc., and many more. We are extremely happy and honored to have him on our interview series today. Welcome, Earl. We are so thrilled to have you.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me here.
It's absolutely a pleasure, Earl. So let's start off with the interview. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey so far? I mean, what brought you to Richer Life LLC?
Sure. Well, the first 35 years of my journey, beginning as an engineer and a technologist and ending as a corporate management executive, spanned a period where there were a lot of changes in societies and around the globe and significant technological innovation. Among them, the first major advances in moving from digital to analog technology, and I was a part of that, resulting in the first personal computers. And I've got some stories about the first computer Motorola tried to bring into the building. And the creation of the internet and the amazing communication tools that have surfaced based on the internet over the past, say, 10, 15 years. Now, all of which have forever changed the way work in most industries around the world is performed and how organizations are structured, how organizations are staffed, and how organizations are managed. Now, the last 10 years of my journey, since retiring from being a part and performing in large corporations, to taking advantage of the opportunity to research, to study, and to design new approaches to improve organizational and personal performance, for me, has also been quite rewarding.
Yeah, I think it would have been a truly eventful journey for you. There have been a lot of transitions in the technological world while you were working. So that would have been really, exciting for you, transitioning from the digital to, the analog world, and then, moving to computers, and then software's taking control over everything. So that should have been really interesting.
Yeah, and there were many gaps along the way. I took a few years and I got into venture capital. I ran a new high-tech startup right before our 9/11. Okay, and that was interesting. And then when I got back into corporate America, I was a senior exec, and I ran all of the secure data centers for Wells Fargo Bank, which is a very huge bank here in the States. And it was amazing having gotten out and gotten back in the big corporations in terms of those things I was just talking about. For example, I had probably 400 reports just overlooking the critical data centers. And I was located in Scottsdale, Arizona, and nobody else was in Scottsdale. Everybody else was all over the country. Different change than when I started with Motorola back in 1979.
That's nice. So, let's talk a little bit about human resources, and which ones are the most interesting aspects of human resources, and your shift from a technology career. Why is that?
Well, how work is performed today differs significantly, as you know, than how it was performed, say, 40 years ago. And one of the major aspects of this shift, I believe, is how human resources differ based on global geography and within various regions. Take the US, for example. The significant move for the US from manufacturing to basically a service-based economy has really prioritized who performs and what type of technology training the resource has. For example, technology-based services such as engineering and scientific research and web design, coding, et cetera, are in high demand and widely sought after, yet their majority of workers in the US are in industries with less technical training, such as transportation, education, daycare. So my shift from technical leadership, if you will, to thought leadership, and that thought leadership has been built around individuals and how individuals can become better employees, and around organizations and how organizations can become better employers, is a shift for me being able to transform my thinking from being just a manager to being both a manager and a leader.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And when we talk about employees and employers a lot, how do you think we can track the employee engagement of an organization? Is there something that we can implement, or is it technology? What is it? How can we do it?
That's a very good question. When the story first, when I left Wells Fargo, retired back in 2009, I always tell the story when I speak is that I took my BlackBerry and walked it and gave it to the HR director, okay, and walked out, and I have not received email on any of my phones since, because I was tethered to that phone and those calls, and it just ran my world. So even today, when I tell people that are constantly in contact with me, if you send me an email, I'm going to read it, because I'm going to take my time. I'm going to get my laptop or my tablet. I'm going to read it all. I'm going to make sure I understand it. I'm going to respond based on what's there. Where today, with the iPhone and all the emails, you get an email at 8 o'clock, you just look at it quickly. By the time 4 o'clock is over, you got 400 more emails. You'll never go back to that email. But one tip, okay, that I think is important and that can at least ensure that hiring managers are on the right track, if they remember this, okay, you should never be the smartest person in the room. Now, by that, I mean that innovation and innovative thinking seldom occurs when everyone in the room looks like you and thinks like you.
So that's a wonderful answer. And so moving on, so when we come to recruiting, organizations of today, they lack a lot of things in recruiting, right? So when they come to recruiting the right talent, hiring the right talent, they fall short on a lot of things. They just worry there's too much talent out there. So what would be your um, hiring best practice, or in an innovative recruiting tip, if you have one?
Well, I think what's important is that even as a hiring manager, if you're able to impress on the candidates that you, the company, and the company culture is one that's quote unquote smart, okay?
Yeah.
By smart, I mean studious. It's a culture that values studying and really thinking through questions as well as answers, okay? Masterful, it's a culture that values those who really want to master their trade and master their contribution, okay? Articulate, that you will find people up and down the organization that have been trained and understand the value of clear communications and making sure that goals and individual goals as well as corporate goals are understood. Also, a culture that values being resourceful. You know, I've worked for years in the project management area. Okay, and recently the advent within the PMI and project management is this idea of being agile, right?
Yeah.
Well, agile has always been there. It's called resourceful. That is, if you've got a project plan in front of you and it has 10 steps, and you know that step 2 will be completed early, and there's someone that can use step 2 to help get their job better, don't just go ahead and complete step 2 and give them that. Doesn't mean you don't lose sight of the entire plan or how all the pieces will come together. So agile, be resourceful. And the T in SMART is probably the most important aspect of both intra-relationships in the corporation and external relationships for the corporation, and important in terms of building the kind of relationship that's going to be long-lasting when you hire someone. As far as retention, that T is for trustworthy.
Wow.
You got to be trustful. And of course, in my latest book, it's called The Smart Leader and the Skinny Principles. And we explore more about this idea of individuals and organizations being smart.
Wow, that's a beautiful concept. And I've read it. The past week I've read somewhere that when you're working for an organization, and when you know that your learning curve is just going up, you know that you're working for good. And the moment it goes flat, you'll have to think twice before continuing on it. So
Yeah.
the SMART concept resonates with this idea as well. So it's being studious and masterful, and that's just wonderful. So thank you so much for that point. And so what do you think are the matters that managements of organizations should keep in perspective while setting organizational goals?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's related to something else also? I mean, with the employee engagement, and what are the things that they need to keep in mind?
Well, I think there's at least 3 things from my experience, having been in large organizations for 35 years and now having evaluated organizations of all sizes for the past 10 years. Mm-hmm. At least 3 things that you need to think about as far as setting goals, okay? And none of these is brain science, okay? It's amazing how you just get away from the fundamentals. But the first one is achievable and realistic. Mm-hmm. Now, sounds easy, right? But if you remember that at the lower management level, the middle management level, and the highest management level in the corporation, each of those individuals have different lens or have a different perspective, okay, on this idea of what's achievable and what's realistic, okay? And the further you get away from the people that are doing the job, the more you think they can do anything. The closer you get down to those people, you find out that may not be the case. And why that may not be the case, the second point is that you need to make sure that the organization's capability is built such that it can be successful, okay? Yeah. Does it have the right talent, okay? Does it have the right skills for today, not for 10 years ago? And is there at all levels of supervisory and management, is there leadership such that it's motivating them, that they're focused, that they want to be engaged, okay? And this idea of employee engagement is one that's been studied and written about, around the world as far as human resources or whatever. But I think there's 3 simple things, okay? If you really want to understand if your employee or if your team or if your organization is really engaged. Okay, look for these three things. One is look for the need for a decrease in how much supervisory assistance they need. Okay, yeah. Once they start taking off by themselves, once they start making the right decisions, once they start doing things that you say, that's what I would have done, okay, then you know that person is engaged. Now, those things are established by management and the company making it clear what their expectations are and training people to understand how to get to those expectations. Second point you should look for, pretty simple. Do you see an increase in the energy in the performance? Okay. I mean, energy, you know, in terms of physics, is so key. Okay. If the energy is there, okay, and that energy is provided, of course, by that motivation. Okay. And the fact that you've got an employee and you've got a assignment, that's a good fit. That's a good match. Okay. And the third is there an observable change in professional and personal growth? And you can see that that person has or is outgrowing that assignment. I used to love that when I see people just outgrow it, you know, and I've seen that in many situations over the years, particularly those people that I've coached and I've mentored, and you just see them just blossom, and you see them just deliver. But then as a manager, then you've got to make sure that you keep them challenged and value that growth.
Wow, that's wonderful. So just out of curiosity, according to you, where do you think, that disengagement of an employee starts? How can an employee realize that, hey, I'm doing it wrong, I'm not engaged enough?
Very good question. It starts where all relationships start, okay? With understanding, trust, and clarity. I mean, if you've got to understand why your job is important and understand what you're doing and understand why you're doing it. And I don't mean someone else. I mean, you got to tell that employee, Earl, here is why your job is important. And Earl, here's what your job is contributing. Okay. And if you share that with me, and I feel that I can trust you, okay? And when I say trust, I mean in the broadest sense, okay? Because from a management and leadership standpoint, we managers tend to think that we get trust because we're the boss or because you're reporting to me. No. Trust is earned, okay? Yeah. And like I talk about in Smart Leader, trust is something that can be earned, but it also can be lost in an instant. And you talked about the pandemic and the separation of people from their jobs and those types of things, okay? Getting reconnected, those people getting back into those jobs is going to be even more important that the manager, the leader, don't take that for granted. I mean, the first thing I would do if I was running an organization where my people have been off for 3 months, okay, like in New York, people this week are just going back. The first thing I do, okay, when they come into work, okay, is get them all together, okay, and let them share with me and share with their cohorts, okay, some of the things they've been through, okay? Not only to allow that person to get that out such that everybody can feel, now why I may be a little grumpy right now, or why, and as long as your cohorts understand that and that you want to share, and also what happens in that process, okay, as a manager, as a leader, you do one of the second most important things behind trust, okay, you offer empathy. I don't mean sympathy. You offer empathy. That is, you know that you don't know. So the only way to try to walk into that person's shoes is to listen. And I'll guarantee you, if you did that with your employees and it was a good back and forth conversation, that your other cohorts are going to be a little bit more sensitive when Nancy isn't as quick as she used to be, because Nancy talked about being home with 4 kids was kind of difficult on her. And it's going to take some time to get back, you know what I mean? And you as a manager will know those buttons to push or not push, and allow your employees to move back into that hopefully trustful relationship that was there prior to the pandemic causing all kinds of havoc.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, a lot of leaders who are struggling with a remote team, and, a lot of employees who are like stuck at home with kids and, a family to take care for, needs to hear this and understand, the feeling of, that overwhelming feeling, that's okay. That will be there. So I think, yeah, that answer makes a lot of sense. And, shifting our focus a little bit, how can the human resource manager ensure that diversity in their culture and support the employee achieve their career goals in an organization?
I grew up in a major corporation, in Motorola. Okay, this was back when Motorola owned analog in the world. I used to go over to go over to China, and they used to call pagers Motorola's, back in that day. And I also grew up here in the States, okay, at the advent of what was defined as affirmative action, okay. When I graduated from high school, 1971, my class was the first integrated class ever in my city and in the whole county. So this idea of understanding diversity, and when I grew up in the corporation as to what that was all about, okay, sort of gave me, and I try to share this with my kids and my grandkids, a different dimension of what that means. Now, certainly in the US, the initial rollout of affirmative action was to try to be, they knew that the African American in the country had been held back for centuries. And I'm not talking about slaves, then 100 years in Jim Crow after slavery, okay? And so that's what it started out being. But what I learned, having watched it roll out and being a manager, we had to go through the numbers, how many this person you have and how many of those you have, that really, the reason that sort of became too laborious for companies and they began to push it off, because that's not really what it's all about. And I've learned over the years that if an HR manager, assuming that they can help move that culture along, is successful in creating and maintaining an organizational culture, okay, from top to bottom, that truly values and embraces, quote unquote, diversity. And that's just not skin color, okay? Yeah. That's thought. That's in how you do your work, and how you communicate. I mean, it's a whole lot more than that. And it's a nuance, seems to be a nuance that we sort of forget, okay, that what I bring to my interface with any individual is my perspective, my history, my experience, my exposure, okay, which I should realize is different than the person I'm interfacing with.
Yeah.
And if you find yourself in that situation as a manager or even as another employee, and you begin to feel uncomfortable, that's good. You need to feel uncomfortable because you need something to tell your mind. Because see, the mind tries to fake you out. That's how it's designed. It's designed to satisfy you. Okay, but you need to be uncomfortable so you can slow down and let your mind tells you, I need to make sure that I'm listening and I'm communicating and I respect. Okay, I'm not focused on their saying ain't instead of aren't. I'm not focusing on some dialect issue. You know, I factor that in as being that person who's still nice and lovely and I care about. Okay, now that's the key. And so if you can get that, your company, your manager to value all that's associated with diversity, then everything else will take care of itself.
Amazing. Yeah. That's wonderful. And Earl, just to kind of wrap up the interview process, if you have any last sound bites that you would like to leave our audience.
Two things. The first is, and I always tell my grandkids this, no one will care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And the second one is, and this is to these managers that are beginning to realize that you wear two hats, the management hat and the leadership hat. I spend a lot of time with project managers trying to help them walk through that transformation, is that you need to work hard to become a trustworthy and empathetic leader. If you're very trustworthy and understand the power of empathy, it will cover a lot of your other shortcomings.
Yeah. Wow, that's wonderful. And I mean, that was very short but crisp. So thank you so much. It's been a really enriching experience for me, and it was an absolute pleasure to talk with you and listen to all of your experiences and learnings from your experience. So it's like an absolute pleasure for someone like me to listen to you, who is very experienced, and I'm sure our audience is going to get a lot of knowledge and value out of this interview. Thank you again for coming to our interview series, and have a healthy and safe time ahead of you.
Thank you.